All right, so we're going to start a clash of code here in about a minute. It could be sooner if somebody joins, but I just wanted to introduce you guys to Clash of Code today because that's one of my favorite um, uh, modes on this platform. And what's cool about Clash of Code is that it brings up a new challenge every single time. So we're going to see here in a second what everybody's working on. All right, so this is a fastest mode, which means whoever turns this in fastest is going to be winning this one. And it's not going to be us because I'm going to be talking out what I'm doing. So we're definitely not going to win this one because I'm going to go at the pace of, even if I know how to figure this out, I'm going to be like talking out loud and explaining what I'm doing here. So is that Daryl that just joined us?
Yeah, that's me. Wait, you guys
Hey, Daryl, how are you?
I just got here. I thought it was starting at 12, so I got here a little late.
It's really, really quiet. Are you able to turn up your volume at all?
Yeah, let me try.
Um, in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and talk my way through this problem. So it says the monkeys are partying on the Funky Monkey Island. This is kind of a weird one. So there are N monkeys on the island, and the day of the week is day. So it's going to give us these two variables. What's in yellow here? That's a variable that it's going to feed us. The monkeys are feeling a bit funky, however. In fact, they are feeling funkiness amount of funky, which is a number from 0 to 10. So we're going to get an integer from 0 to 10. Print out monkey n times on a single line separated by spaces. But if the day is Friday, then the monkeys are feeling extra funky, and you should print out Funky Monkey Friday n times on a single line separated by spaces. But if funkiness is greater than or equal to 7, then the monkeys are feeling exceptionally funky, and you should print out everything in all uppercase. Okay, so that's a lot of strange things, but we're going to learn a couple commands here. So first, we're importing these modules, which is basically expanding the list of commands that we're able to use when we import sys and math. But we're probably not going to use these in most cases, but we could, um, call on those functions inside of that. Um, what we're going to be given is a variable n. So this variable is going to be an integer, and n is the number of monkeys on the island. And then we're going to have the day, which they gave us special conditions for if it's Friday. So we have to check whether that day is a Friday. And then we also have the funkiness level. And if the funkiness is greater than or equal to 7, then what we're printing out has to be in uppercase. Okay, so then we have an example. If I scroll down here, we have an example of um, there's 3 monkeys. It's a Monday, and the funkiness level is only 2, so it's not going to be in caps, and so we're going to print it out n number of times. So monkey, monkey, monkey is what it wants to see. So we're going to print out monkey n times and then print out. Um, okay, so I think I've got pretty much the idea of all of this stuff. Now, one of the things to keep in mind when you're doing a Clash of Code or when you're doing one of the challenges or contests or anything like that, you're probably going to get the first few attempts wrong. You see all these play test case down here? There's probably going to be an error almost every time that you do that as your first try. That's just the way it goes. That's programming, right? So anybody who's taken programming last semester or anybody who has a little bit of experience with this kind of already knows you're going to get a lot of errors when you're especially when you're first starting and learning the syntax of it. It's like the grammar of the language. And that is totally okay. That is normal. And so, don't be surprised when you see that. So let's see if we can pass some of these test cases. Anybody have an idea of what I should print out here or what logic I should start with? Or what are some ideas? Let me kick it to you guys.
I mean, you first have to get the input, right?
Yeah,
And that's
so
already
I'm collecting all those input automatically. They did give me variables to collect that input with. So they're going to give me n, which is the number of monkeys. They're going to give me day, which is a string, right? Because it doesn't have the letters int in front of it. So day is going to be a string, and then it's going to give me funkiness level, which is going to be a float. So that's actually not an integer, that's a float. And as long as that float is greater than or equal to 7, then I have to put it in uppercase. All right, so what am I going to type out?
Are we first gonna set set one of them to 0 or no?
Well, what do you mean? Set one of what to 0?
You know what? I
One of
don't
those
know.
variables?
Yeah, I was thinking possibly one of the variables to 0.
Yeah, so you can initialize variables by setting them equal to 0. So for example, if I want an integer to be created, the way that you can create an integer is you just declare it and set it equal to 0. And notice that I didn't say that it had to be an integer. If I wanted to define that this is an integer, which makes my code a little bit more readable and easy to follow, the way to do it would be to put a colon here and put int. And I could set it equal to 0. I don't really need to in this case because it's going to be defined just below that. It's already going to be giving us what the value of n is. But it's not a bad thing to initialize variables and set and give them some starting point. And I could do the same thing with day. Actually, I don't want to do that with day because it's a string. And once you declare what a string is in Python, you can't change it. Strings are immutable, which means that they can't be modified or changed the way that well, they can be modified. You can add to it, and you can actually subtract from it, but you can't just change it. So you can with integers. I could change a 0 to a 3 or whatever the integer would actually be, and it'll just write over it. It'll change it. But a string doesn't work. That it's not that friendly. So a string is going to be immutable. And once I declare what it is, I can't change it. So I'm actually not going to do that with day. I'm just going to leave day as it is.
So
But again,
sorry,
no, go ahead.
I was gonna ask, since there are constraints,
Mhm.
should we create I don't know how it is in Python, I'm more familiar with C, but if then statements to ensure that the input actually is within the ranges that we have?
So yeah, that would be a good strategy, and it would be appropriate to do that for Python as well. But because I'm familiar with this website, I'm not going to do that for this one because what they're doing in the constraints is they're saying that behind the scenes, they've already put those constraints in there for us. They've already got those if-then statements in the referee, and so it will only be providing us values. It's guaranteeing to us that we will only be getting values of monkeys that are between 1 and 100 and so on. But yeah,
Okay, got it.
yeah, that's a good thing to point out is that these are constrained values. So we are guaranteed these conditions. So, but if then statements, conditional statements are going to be really important for us. So under what condition are we going to print what? What would be one of the things they told us here that we would have to have a condition for?
Isn't it Friday?
Yeah. So if it's so we can say if day equals Friday, and notice that I've got two equal signs. So in math, you would usually just have one equal sign, and it would mean the same thing as if you're assigning a value like x equals 3, or if you're declaring that an equation is one side is equal to the other. They don't really distinguish that in math, but in computer science, they do. And so if day equals Friday, that means if this thing is equal to this thing. So it's checking a condition. It's checking whether a condition is true. And if it has one equal sign like it did up here, n equals, and then there's an integer that it's giving us, then now it's saying n is being assigned the value of whatever the integer of that string is. So that's just something to be aware of, that if you've only had math classes, it is a little bit different because they're breaking out two different purposes for an equal sign and checking whether something is true, checking whether something is equal to something else is done by that double equal sign. So if day is equal to Friday, then what are we going to do? We're going to print. We're going to print
Funky Monkey Friday.
Funky Monkey Friday, right? And do we have to print it out n times? Yeah, we have to print it out n times. So we're actually going to print that times the number of times. Now, this is one of those weird things where you can actually have an operation for strings. You could do a mathematical operation on strings, and this is the only one I can think of, which is that you can multiply it times an integer. So if we multiply a string times an integer, that means that it's going to print that out that many times. And so I think that's probably what I want to do there. And I'm actually going to use a special command, which is a separator. And I think that will separate each one of these things. If not, I'll have to come up with another way of doing it. But I want there to be a space in between those because it looks like here there's a space in between these, right? So, or maybe here's another one I could do. I'll do that times n and then dot. No, wait a minute.
Is there a new line character in Python, like the \n for C?
There is, yeah. It's also backslash n for Python.
Mhm. Oh, but you want a space, not another line,
Right.
right? So
Yeah.
that wouldn't work. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't want to, yeah. So I do want there to be a space, but I don't want it to finish with a space. So this is not a great way, but what I could do is, n minus one, and then end equals empty set or empty string. And then I could do print Funky Monkey Friday, and it wouldn't have a space at the end. So in other words, this is going to do Funky Monkey Friday for all of the monkeys except for the last one, and then the last one I'm going to have it print an extra, and then it won't have a space at the end because I'm just preventing it from printing that space. So let's see if it's funky one. Let's see if it passes that one. Okay, so my output was it's funky time. Oh, I don't want it to do that. There we go. Okay. Let's try that again. So funky one, it found nothing and it wanted monkey one. No, I want Friday. There it is. Okay, so it passed the Friday. So that's what I was trying to have it do is funky monkey Friday, funky monkey Friday. So there was two monkeys there, right? It printed it out twice. There was a space in between. There was not a space at the end. So not a great solution to this, but it did get the job done. So if the day is a Friday, then we're set. So what about if the day is not a Friday? What command would we use here then?
Else.
Else. We're going to use an else in
Also,
Python.
Also, you in the top left is saying you have a minute left.
Oh, yeah, we're almost out of time. Okay, so let's print this out pretty quick. So else we're going to print monkey times n and print actually times n minus one, right? Because I want the spaces otherwise, and I have to put an end equals. If I don't want it to, it automatically would do a next line, but if I don't want it to do that, then it's going to have to be that. All right, so that's gonna solve most of them, but the problem is, that I need it to print, all caps if if the, day is, or if the funkiness is greater than 7, right? So let me see here. It's gonna pass some of these tests, but oh, we timed out. Okay. I'm just gonna use my current code then. I'll go ahead and use my current code. So you can see I got 4th place with this because we didn't quite finish. So we only got 60% of the way there. I'm going to go ahead and share my code, and you can see that some of these other folks did also share their code too. One of the advantages of using Python 3 on this platform is that Python is really, really popular, as is JavaScript. So you see, usually there's more Python than JavaScript, but you see a lot of other people's code. So this is a really more efficient way of doing this than what we had. Let's follow what this person did. So n is equal to the integer input. This is all the same right here. This first thing, except for the funkiness level, he just changed that to F. He didn't want to have such a long variable name, I guess. So he just changed the funkiness to F. And then he said, if day is equal to Friday, then here's what we do, right? So pretty much the same kind of thing, except that he, instead of using a print statement, was using a string. So this is a really good way to do it. So Funky Monkey Friday is going to be given a string of, and it's actually a set. So he's going to be able to use the join command, or not a set, but a list. So he's using lists, which we haven't really talked about yet. But this is a good way to do it. And then else it's going to be just monkey instead of Funky Monkey Friday. So then S is going to be defined then as this is basically turning it into a string by using the .join command. So he's taking this list and he's turning it into a string, and he's joining together each element of the list. And he's joining them together using a space. So in other words, this is saying insert a space in between each of the elements in the list S. And I'll talk about lists in a second, but for now, let's just say that he's turning that into a string. And then he's got a condition here where if F is greater than or equal to 7, then S is going to equal S dot upper. And then he's having it print. So I want to go to Python online compiler and just show you guys in the browser here on another IDE, which this is a IDE means integrated developer environment. So this is just a vanilla version of Python running here in a browser that's not associated with coding game. It's just I'm gonna write what a list is. So for example, if I have let's say A equals and then items that are in a shopping list or something like that. So eggs, comma, milk, comma, bread. So I meant to put these brackets, not the squiggly lines, but the brackets. Squiggly lines will be something else. But if it's brackets like this, then this list of A, if I print A, you can see it's got these elements inside. Well, I can join that together. So I could put a space here, .join, and then what list I'm joining together. So I can run that and you'll see that it doesn't have all those extra symbols the way that a list does. So that's what he was doing, is he was inserting a space here, and I could insert any character. I could put like the and symbol if I wanted to do that, and then it's going to separate each of them with an and symbol. Or I could put it with and then spaces, and I can run that and you can see what that produces. So whatever's in the quotations here is what's going to be separating each of the elements inside of a list. And the dot join method is going to take whatever's in that list and basically turn it into a string with what's here separating it.
That's actually pretty neat. Not gonna lie.
Yeah. No, that was a really
That
good
would have been
solution to
useful.
that. Yeah, because you
Yeah,
could
if
see
I knew that.
what came to my mind first was like just this really obnoxiously long, cumbersome way of printing out multiple statements. That was not a good way of solving it. This is a much better way of solving it. And that brings me to my point, which is that if you're playing these Clash of Codes, it doesn't matter whether you win or lose. The point is that you're going to learn from other people's code whenever they share it, and you're going to get better really fast. So this is how I learned in only a couple months what I had been trying to figure out for a really long time. So like Fiorella was talking about, I've been trying to teach myself Python and had trouble doing it by myself. But when I was doing these Clash of Codes, I could get these hints by seeing what other people were doing, and it just really sped up my journey because I could also look up in the documents. You can go to, like, I could, for example, if I didn't know what a command was, I'll go to join Python. So that tells you, okay, there's a join command. So I can click on this. I can just Google it and see what join does. And so the Python string join method, what does it do? And this tells you all about it. And you can do that for any command that you don't recognize. You can always just go and Google that command once you know about it and see it used. It gives you a little bit of exposure to that. So yeah, so Daryl says, so dot join puts everything from the list into the string. Yes, so join is that's our way of putting these, and it doesn't have to just be a list. You can see that it also works on tuples, which we probably won't have time to talk very much about tuples today, but you can go into pretty much any of these commands and learn more about them. So reading the documentation, Googling each of those terms that you don't understand, that is a huge part of programming. That's how you make a lot of progress. And so going back to our Clash, again, you can see I got 4th place, but really who cares, right? It doesn't matter where you place in these clashes, especially in the first few months or years that you're playing this, because you've got experienced players that have been coding sometimes for years, and they're solving these problems. They're gonna knock these things out really quickly. You can see this guy, he did this in under 2 minutes or under 3 minutes, right? So don't compare yourself to how long it takes anybody else. Just learn from what they're doing, because they're showing you ways that are really efficient at solving these problems. And they'll have ideas that you might never have thought of. So it's really cool that we can share with each other over Clash of Code this way. So Clash of Code is one of the really great modes of working with Code and Game. Another thing that I really like is the AI bots. So the first bot that they're going to introduce you to is actually over here. The first bot that they're going to introduce you to is Mad Pod Racing. And you can see there's 172,000 people that have competed in this one. And the very next highest, like, I don't even know, there's a huge drop off. There's probably only 20,000 or so people that compete in the next one, the next easiest, because a lot of people give up after, a very short period of time. And the reason why, I want to end on this note, because, well, first I'll just show you what this looks like. It is very cool. This is a pretty fun one. It's like a race, like on Star Wars, the pod racing thing. So you're just playing against this. You're telling the computer, this is all the code there is to it over here in this window. That's less than the previous challenge, and it doesn't take much. It just wants to know the thrust and the direction that you're sending your pod. And so that'll get you on the leaderboard if you just, get started with this. So these are really fun. They can be a little bit more tricky than the Clash of Code in most cases, but sometimes they are pretty easy. But what I wanted to leave you with as a thought is, let me share screen again. I'll bring a whiteboard up. So what people expect is that as you practice coding, your progress should look like this. So the time that you spend, and let's say this axis represents your skill. So you think that the more time you put in, the more skill you're going to have, right? So, and that's logical, that makes sense, but that is absolutely not how it works. The way it works is more like this. So you're going to code for a very long time and have no clue what you're doing, and it's going to be super frustrating, and you're not going to feel like you're making any progress. And it's going to be this disillusionment, which I probably misspelled because I rely on spell checkers, but disillusionment meant. And so there's going to be this huge gap between where you think you should be and where you actually are at first. And during that period, you're going to wonder, like, should I even be a coder? Is this even worth it? What am I doing? Why am I not getting better? And so just be aware that this is why most people quit, is because it's an exponential curve of learning. And for a long period of time, well, I mean, for some period of time, it's not terrible, but for long enough to make most people quit, the exponential growth, you are growing this entire time. You have exponential growth. So like here's 0. It's not like you're not getting better. You are getting better, but you're getting better at an exponential rate. And when you multiply a small number times some exponential value, you still end up with a small number. But when you multiply a bigger number times exponential growth, then you end up with a much bigger number, right? And so you don't really get to see the results at first, but you're going to reach this crossing over point where it's like, oh, I actually am learning this stuff. This is pretty fun. And then as time goes on from there, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I am learning so much. I've gotten so much better. I'm really glad I stuck with this. So this is like the glad phase right here. And so the goal is to stick with this long enough that you get through this initial period of feeling like you're not making any progress, which for me, by the way, took about 3 to 4 months before I felt like I was actually getting any better. So for a long time, I was like getting errors all the time. I didn't really understand. I couldn't solve even simple problems. It was very frustrating. And then it just sort of clicked, and it's like a language where you can speak it and it just becomes yours. And then so that gets me over to this side over here. So the goal of the club, I want to help more people get through this not so fun period over here to the part where you can do stuff and feel good about it. So that's what Code Club is all about. And we're at 11:56 for today, so I think we'll probably have to leave it there. But what would you guys want to work on more next time? Do you guys want to do more Clash of Code, or do you want to work on like writing the AI for some of those competitions, or do you want to just review basic commands? What should we focus on?
I kind of like the idea of reviewing some basic commands for at least for some of those that don't know some of the commands. I think that'll be pretty helpful for them. And then it'll also be a refresher for me because I haven't coded in some time.
Okay, perfect. What do you think, Fiorella? What would you like to work on?
I think the Clash of Code would be helpful too. That way it lets us improve in how we understand coding.
Cool. Okay. So I think what we could do is like review some of the basics and then jump into a clash, and that would be a good approach. And then the people who already know that stuff can be the ones that explain it, so that it's not me talking the whole time, and you guys can, get some practice explaining to each other. So, let's plan to do that. And yeah, I really like the Clash of Code as far as a learning tool, and I would really strongly recommend you guys to practice at least one clash per day. So regardless of where you come in, like whether you're able to finish it in 15 minutes or not, or whether you're even able to place on the leaderboard at all, like none of that matters. Just getting yourself to code on Clash of Code once per day or more, that is a victory. All right, just getting yourself there and getting the practice. So like for example, that's the goal that I set for myself, and regardless of whether I felt like I was getting any better or not, I at least knew that I had my consistency tuned in, and I was completing at least one thing per day, making one attempt per day. But most days, to be honest with you, it was really fun, and it was like, oh, I could have got that one. And so it gets addictive, and you want to do a lot more than one per day. Like there were some days I did 5 or 6, 7. Like I did a lot of those clashes. Up to this point, I'm at like 350 clashes I've done. So like they get really fun. They get really addictive, especially once you're able to start completing more of them. All right. So I'm going to let you guys go. Thank you all so much for being here, and I'll see you in the next one.
All right, thank you. See you, Jesse.